Rojette is a mental health worker in the workplace wellness facilitator for the Canadian Mental Health Association in Saskatoon. With a background in psychology, she supports workplace wellness and focuses on practical, accessible approaches to mental health and well-being. Jen, it's one of the most dominating topics right now in construction. Wouldn't you agree?
I absolutely agree. I think mental health in the construction workplace is something that is a very important topic in today's world. And I'm very excited to see Rojette. I would like to take a little bit of time, though, to just thank everybody for your comments. A good morning to a lot of you people here. I do see Allen Construction and Ironclad, and some takeaways that we didn't quite get to. We were waiting for some of our commentaries. I would like to say thank you to Ed for giving us his opinion. That key takeaway being that safety is not the absence of incidences and injuries, it's the presence of controls. That's a really good way to think about that, and I might take that into my LSC class. And to Dustin Johnson as well, one of his key takeaway, energy-based safety, educating our leaders and frontline on identifying high energy hazard tasks, focusing on SIF prevention through HECAs is going to help industry move the needle, which I really enjoy. And in fact, with Steve Air, one of my key takeaways was in fact that gravity severity analysis. What a great way to identify a different look at the priority index. It was one of my key takeaways from that day. So thank you so much for sharing. That being said, please continue as a group on the comment box. We absolutely love seeing them in. It looks like Rojette is ready to go, Zach. So let's please give a warm welcome to Rojette. Over to you. Oh, there we go. Good morning,
Hi, good morning,
Rojette.
everybody. Can you hear me? I'm having trouble with my audio, so okay, I got the green light that you can hear me. So, good morning. My name is Rojette Besana, and I am with the Canadian Mental Health Association as a mental health worker. We are a nonprofit community-based organization here in Saskatoon, and we are dedicated to building mentally healthy workplaces, and also we do a lot of work with community members with mental health care. Before we continue, I would like to acknowledge that we are in Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis, and we pay our respect to all Indigenous people of this place and reaffirm our relationships with one another. It is a privilege to be here with you this morning, and thank you for having me be part of the conversation in the conference about safety in the workplace. This is my first time doing a virtual presentation, so please bear with me as I navigate it. I may be a little bit slow. I also don't have audio at the moment, so I will be monitoring the comment section for any questions. I do have one request from you guys today, as it would be really helpful to the engagement of today's session and also the conversation that we're going to have around mental health. And my request is that if you could participate in any way that you can with the questions that I may have. If you have anything to add as I go through my presentation, I would really appreciate it. Okay. I want to first start off with a question for everybody. So please send your answers in the chat of what you think the practices are of staying safe in the workplace. You don't have to think too much about it. Whatever it is that the first thing comes to your mind. How do we stay safe in the workplace? You tend to focus more on physical injury potential by preparing for the task. When you say focus more on physical injury potential, what are the things that you prepare to focus on that? Good controls, presence of mind, planning and training. I really like, and I really want to focus on what Curtis said in the very beginning, which is that we tend to focus more on the potential for physical injury. So yeah, knowing your hazards, following procedures, using the right PPE, reports of anything unsafe. And the reason why I asked that is I wanted to open up the conversation about workplace safety and how, yes, we do often focus on the potential for physical injury. And I'm sure all of you guys know occupational health and safety, right? It gives us the instructions to, and the standards and the guidelines not to fall off a ladder or not to get hit by a moving vehicle or protect our backs from being in the office for too long. My next question is, and I'm sure you're expecting this question, but do those standards and those guidelines, do they provide us with the standards to stay safe from stress and burnout? The stress that gives you those Sunday scaries, so like when it hits 8 p.m. and you're thinking, oh, it's Monday, I have to go to work tomorrow. Or the stress of asking for help when you don't know what to do or the schedule has overwhelmed you. There are also the hazards for harassment at work. Do you have the right tools to address those things? Thank you so much for everybody's participation. Luckily, we do have psychological health and safety, and I'm sure that you guys are all aware of the psychological health and safety. And it is very similar to the occupational health and safety standard. And it is through the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and they launched it in 2013. Just like how the occupational health and safety standards for physical safety, psychological health and safety standards are set in place to ensure that the workplace protects employees from psychological harm. So those are things like a toxic environment or chronic work overload, harassment. The most important part here too is that it really brings in the focus on how important or how it's the same importance as physical health is your mental health. It gives you the opportunity to feel safe and speak without fear of judgment. And there are certain systems in place to prevent burnout and stress. But why is it important that this is supported in the workplace? Why is mental health important? But first, I want to see what is mental health to you guys. Anything that pops in your head, you don't have to look up the definition. I kind of just want to gain an understanding of what is mental health to you guys. Yep. Practice of self-care. You guys are great. This is amazing. And all of these are great and they're all correct. Mental health is something that we all have. It's the same exact thing as physical health, but mental, of course. It's our minds. It's the ability for us to think, to feel, and to act, to be able to process life stressors and be able to get through them with resilience. It's how our mind works. It allows us to feel sadness, to feel happiness, to feel overwhelmed, to feel stress. And just like how our physical health can be affected sometimes by illness, our mental health can be impacted too. So the good thing about it is we're not always going to be sad. We're not always going to be stressed. We're not always going to be overwhelmed, but we're always not going to be happy as well. And the reason why I really wanted to highlight mental health in the beginning is there are a lot of misconception with mental health. A lot of it sometimes is interchangeably used with mental illness. And mental illness is different from mental health. Like what I had said before, we all have mental health, but we don't all have mental illness. Mental illness are diagnosable health conditions such as depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia. And I'm going to move to the next slide here and give you a little bit more of an idea of statistics in Canada. Also, I'm sorry that my presentation got a little bit wonky. But I want you to focus on the first point there, which is psychological health problems are the #1 cause of disability in Canada. And this really surprised me, maybe because I don't work in construction places, I don't work into trades. And so I've always had this idea in my head that the probability or the risk of physical injuries, so falling, breaking your back, a knee, spraining your ankle, I thought that those were really, really common, and finding out that psychological health problems are actually the #1 cause of disability in Canada really surprised me. I want to know if this is something that's a surprising statistic for you guys as well, knowing that you work in this field already. Was it a surprise that psychological health problems actually outweigh the physical injuries that we see at work? Not surprised at all. Could you walk me through why this was not a surprise to you guys? That's exactly what I was looking for. Many are hidden. The difference between psychological injuries and physical injuries is that we can see the physical injuries, but with psychological injuries, they're not always physical. We can't see them. And so the thing with physical injuries is that they're more regulated at work. We've had OH&S for a very long time, while psychological health and safety have only been here, I believe, 14 years. And it's only been recently that we've recognized that these psychological hazards are occupational risks as well. Yeah. And with a back injury, we typically have a prognosis of when you'll heal, right? Usually they'll give you weeks or months, or we can get it treated surgically, or we have a predictable recovery time. But many psychological conditions, they last longer, they fluctuate, they reoccur. And the biggest thing too is that they impact functioning more broadly. So a back injury may affect your physical capacity, but severe depression affects your cognitive, your emotional, your behavioral, and capacity all at once. Now, I don't want the messaging to be that psychological problems are more important and should be addressed more heavily than physical injuries, because they're actually connected. So chronic pain and physical illness increase the risk of depression. So someone who may be going through a chronic health condition are unable to live their lives, unable to have routine, unable to regularly meet with their loved ones, have connection, that can affect their mental health as well. What I'm really just trying to say is that psychological injuries are as prevalent, if not more, than physical injuries. We're just not trained to see it. Absolutely. Okay. Sorry, I'm just looking through my screen here. I feel it looks like they fixed it for me. Perfect. Okay, hold on. Okay. Quickly going back here, just want to touch on that last part there, which is the $50 billion each year that we lose to the Canadian economy because of mental illness. And I know sometimes it can be, there could be this misconception that mental health training or mental health, like conferences like these workshops, they can be costly to book somebody to come in and give a workshop to a big team. But if you actually look at it from these statistics, investing in mental health intervention early on is actually going to cost you less in terms of money, of course, but also the biggest thing is wellness and well-being in the workplace. That $50 billion, $20 billion of that is through because of mental illness. So that's the increased short-term or long-term disability claims, the WCB claims, the stress leaves, the decreased productivity and motivation, high turnover and absenteeism. Those actually cost money and cost a lot of health to our employees. And in the side there, I want to note that this week, 500,000 Canadians will miss work due to their mental health. And even that comes with a lot of fear because mental health sick days are not openly accepted. Because like what we had mentioned earlier, a lot of these psychological injuries are hidden. So we can't physically see someone sick. It's often called a hidden disability. And that often does not get as much support as physical disabilities. It is interesting how a negative individual can affect mental health in a workplace in a negative manner in a short period of time. That's actually a very good point, and that is a big topic that we will be moving forward to later in the presentation. So we'll discuss that as well. I'm glad that you brought that up. Okay. Now I want to go back to the basics, right? We're always talking about stress. We're always told to reduce stress. Here are some stress management tips, but what does it actually mean? As you can see there, I've categorized that there's two types of stress. There's a good stress and there's bad stress. Good stress is just temporary pressure on yourself to meet deadlines, get something done, learn new things. Typically, when you're experiencing good stress, you feel energized or alert. And with good stress, there's usually 3 parts to it. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So it pushes you forward to get what you need done, to learn what you need to do. And then once that situation is done and gone, the stress leaves with it. Now with the bad stress, this is the harmful one that we're always being told to reduce or to avoid or to work towards not keeping in our lives. And this is the type of stress that would lead you to the burnout. And that's the chronic stress. So this is the stress where you're stressed because of one event, but then once that event is gone, the stress stays with you. So these are moments where you have a stressful day at work, but you never actually log out. So when you go home, you bring it home. To those with families, with kids, those are one of the risks to bad stress and to chronic stress is we actually affect our loved ones and it just doesn't affect us as a whole. And so when that stress stays with you, you bring it everywhere you go and it strains a lot of relationships. It strains a lot of like self-care practices. You tend to neglect a lot of different areas in your life because you're in that constant state of just survival. And this will always leave you feeling drained, overwhelmed, irritable. And this is the stress that I want to focus on today. Okay. As you can see on the screen, and as you have shared in the comments, construction work is a very high stress environment. Like I said, I don't work in the trades, so I don't have a lot of personal experience with it, but I do have a best friend that works in the field as well. And so we have a lot of conversation around it. and he actually recently just got back from a 2-week trip up north. So he was working up to 14 hours a day, limited cell service. And the thing is, he's only been in this field for less than a year. We're both new grads, so we're both very we're babies in our fields. So this is his first busy season. After working many winters, during very little shutdowns, very few projects that really needed him outside of the city. So he's experiencing a lot of shock right now because all of a sudden he's really busy, back-to-back 2-week trips that are away from family, very far away from his hometown. This recent one that he just came home from, the home time, the end date of the trip kept changing. And so that caused a lot of anxiety for him because he had already planned in his head that, okay, I'm going home at this time. I'm finally seeing my family. But then it kept changing because of the different factors at work. Equipment shut down, things were not coming on time, or shift changes, and things had to be pivoted. And so when he came home, we sat down and we talked, and he realized that this is not the field for him. In this particular, I guess, role that he is in, it requires a lot of time away from family, a lot of long hours, and also I do want to note that I do have consent from him to talk about this and discuss this with you guys. It's kind of like just to share another perspective, and also he helped a lot with giving me knowledge around this, and so I just want to note that with you. And I was actually practicing this presentation with him last night, and I asked him if he knew about the suicide statistics of construction workers. And that's the next slide that we're going to go into. But he was surprised. He was surprised but not shocked to learn that suicide was 3 times higher in the construction field and the construction workers than any other occupation. So aside from the adverse working conditions, the long hours, the unstable nature of the work, we talked about how the factor of construction being a male-dominated field plays a role into how mental health is addressed. So as you can see here, women in the construction field, so on-site or off-site, were found to actually report more experiences of anxiety, stress, depression, harassment, feeling like they need to prove themselves to fit in, still feeling underappreciated. But yet, 75% of suicides are actually men. Does somebody have an idea or insight as to why that is? Why do we think that women are reporting that the workplace is stressful for them and they're experiencing a lot of mental health issues, yet men are the ones who are dying by suicide at a higher rate? Men are culturally less likely to be open or seek help for mental health distress. It's hard to get these guys to talk about feelings. Men tend to have the impression that it is weakness if they're struggling. They don't talk about it, and that leads to greater depression. Fear, yep. Suck it up, yes. And that's all true. Being that it's male-dominated, stigma is way higher, and help seeking is very low. And I'll go over everything that you touched on the comments. I'm gonna slightly change the gear a little bit into a lighter mood. I'm gonna ask you if you've heard of this term, macho culture. Who has heard of this term before? Never heard of it? Yes. Yeah. I was speaking to my friends about this the other day, and of course they're into different fields, so they're very far away from the construction field. But this is not. This is not what it is. It's not macho men in the workplace, and that would be very inappropriate. But it's this. It's these sayings. Man up, tough it out, right? If you can't handle it, I'm sure you've heard of it. You're a pussy. You're a bitch. You're a baby. No excuses. And to be very honest with you, I've said some of these things before too. It doesn't just happen in construction sites or in the trades. These are words that I grew up with, have used, and have only really understood now that I'm an adult and I have more life experience how harmful they are, even if they're used in humor. So this macho culture refers to the historical societal conditioning in men to just tough it out from childhood, right? Boys were told not to cry, don't be a baby. A real man doesn't show weakness. Feminine traits are usually seen as being sad, feminine traits are usually seen as bad. So that's being sad or crying or having problems. And they were always seen as weak and not socially acceptable for men. And historically, in workplaces, men who showed traits of assertiveness, aggressiveness, logical thinking, and not emotional were the ones who were rewarded. They were the ones who got the CEO roles, the high leadership roles. And if they did show signs of weakness, like being upset over a family matter, the death of their childhood dog, or a breakup, they were laughed at, mocked, called gay, a baby. And in the screen there, a lot of these informal conversations have a lot of these swear words, right? A pussy. And it's funny, I know, to say it in a professional setting, but that's just how it is, right? That's how these conversations go, because that's the reality of how society has conditioned the male population. Yeah. And for generations and generations, this has continued. I can see in the comments, been there, seen that. You've probably seen it in your families, from grandpa to great grandpa. It's been a thing that's been conditioned in our society to accept as normal. So I'm going to show you a clip of how this might look like in the workplace. And I warn you that there are a lot of swear words, but I'm sure we hear a lot of this in our day-to-day lives. I'm sure I hear it in our workplace as well. So let's see if this will work. Oh. looks like there's no sound, so that's okay. I'll just give you a brief description of the video. I won't do it justice, but essentially it's these men who are in the construction field doing a little role play of how safety talk kind of unravels during when mental health is brought up. And in the video, it looks like the big boss, he lets the guy behind the camera talk about mental health. Yeah. And he just is appalled. Mental health? What the fuck is that? I'm sure we all have a little loose screws in our head, but we can get to work. We don't have time for that right now. Nope. Mental health sick days. What's that? Do I get to go home 15 minutes earlier today? I got bills to pay. And basically, what I wanted to show in that video is this could be what it looks like in the workplace, right? These conversations could still be happening in the workplace. It's not very long that we started talking about mental health in the workplace, and so there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. It's not as good as we want it to be when compared to physical safety. And so I wanted to address that these conversations can still happen, and these words are still being said. And what does that perpetuate, right? That kind of culture, that language, and that environment. In that environment, who would be brave enough to tell that boss that the job has been negatively affecting them, or that they need some support to excel in the workplace? The thing with working is that we almost sometimes don't have a choice if we're struggling or it's not the ideal environment that we want to be in, because the reality of it is we need to work, right? We need to get paid. We need to bring food to the table. We need to support our families. And so I would be scared too if those conversations and those kind of language is what my environment is, right? And so that's kind of, I wanted to really touch on that macho culture, because that is a big reason as to why we are staying stuck a little bit in providing support in the workplace, but also in the males in the construction sites. And the thing with this macho culture is it doesn't just affect the men in the workforce. This affects the entire team. Because then that kind of thinking, women in on-site or off-site are also struggling to find a place of belonging, or struggling to feel like they're important as well, or struggling to be heard. So what I'm going to go through next is what to do, right? What do we do now? These things are happening, or we're working towards something, but these things are still happening. I need to work. Just because it's not the ideal working environment for me doesn't mean that I can afford to quit or move somewhere else, right? And so I'm going to touch on 3 levels. There's 3 parts that need to happen in a workplace for us to be able to care for ourselves and truly reduce the stress and burnout in the workplace. So the 3 levels are on the individual level, the leaders, and then systemic. We're going to first start off on the individual level. So that's us. We don't know how to help us. We don't know how to help ourselves if we don't know what we need help with, right? We sometimes forget that even within a workplace where we may think that a lot of things are outside our control, we still actually have a level of control. And that's through introspection. Am I frozen, guys? Good. Okay. Okay, I will move forward. Thank you. So yes, introspection. So this is the practice of self-awareness. So it's looking inside ourselves and looking at how we think, how we feel, how we react to things. It's asking yourself questions like, what are my triggers? What makes me upset? What makes me feel drained, accomplished, overwhelmed? When I feel those uncomfortable emotions, what do I do about it? What helps me? What doesn't help me? How am I showing up in my relationships? To my colleagues, my peers, my loved ones? Is there something that I'm missing? Did I sleep? Did I sleep enough? What did I have to eat today? Did I take my medications? Do I need some movement? The diagram here on the screen, the diagram of control, is something I've been working on ever since I entered the field of mental health. And it's actually something that I still struggle with right now. In my role, I see a lot of clients who may be experiencing one of the worst days of their lives, right? They come to me or CMHA for support on where to go, what to do, what's best for them. How do I navigate this? And actually, when I used to support a client in addiction who had expressed interest in sobriety, I remember I would be so crushed all the time whenever they would constantly miss appointments with me to take those steps. We would always try to meet so that we can discuss what are the things that we can get together for this person so that they can start their journey to sobriety. I would always question, why didn't they just come? Why didn't they want to do the necessary steps to do what I thought was best for them, which was to go to detox. And it was quickly that I learned that, some clients experience complex mental health issues. And I had to learn not to take things very personally when a client is not ready to do what I think is good for them, because that was out of my control. And actually, it was not my job. It was not my job to tell them what I think is good for them, because I would never know what's good for them. They are their own people, and we follow the mandate that we meet people where they're at. And so I dwelled on those moments a lot, and I burnt out very, very fast because I kept absorbing all of my clients' experiences. So, if a client is struggling, but they're struggling to find their way, I would take it personally when I would tell them what to do, but they don't follow through. And I had to really learn very quickly to accept things in my control and let go of things that were not. Because if I kept dwelling on things that I couldn't control, I would go crazy. Because nothing would go my way. Right? Because those are things that I couldn't control. But I started focusing on things that I could control, which was making sure that they're well connected to resources, to the community. They know where to access services. They know that my service as a support person is always going to be here when they're ready. I had to take out that part in me that always battled between pushing them to do what I think would be good for them, because it really was not my job and it was something outside of my control. And so being in the mental health sector, which is also a very high stress field and very emotionally demanding, we are providing a lot of supports for these clients, for the community. And so I had to learn how to support myself as well. And I'm sure you've heard of this so many times. And as corny and cliche as it is, it really is truly that you cannot care for anyone or anything else if you are not cared for first. So that applies to your loved ones, your friends, a job, school, your role in the community. Those will not be able to receive the type of care that they need if you, as the individual, are not taken care of. And so I'm going to share this activity that I like to do when I come into these presentations. Being that we are virtual today, unfortunately, we won't be able to do this, but this is one of the things that really helps me be in tune with my body. It actually is the activity that helped me realize that the TMJ that I have, that my jaw clicks, was actually because of stress, and that my best friend's nighttime anxiety attacks were because of stress. It's because we actually sat down and I was intentional with trying to figure out how to help myself and how to support myself. And this was a great activity for me to be able to be intentional with that. Because it really allows you to talk to yourself and get to know how you respond to high stress situations. Because your physical health is closely tied to your mental health, right? As we had previously discussed earlier. So what could be chest pains or difficulty breathing could actually be stress-induced anxiety. And it actually took me a while to realize that the reason why my jaw was clicking was because I was clenching all day. I didn't catch myself clenching while writing emails, or I was literally cutting onions. Like, it really was not that serious, but I was clenching all the time. I was bracing all the time for something, but I didn't know what it was. And so my nervous system couldn't differentiate between going to war and writing an email. And so my jaw was clenched all day to the point that I somehow dislocated some discs, and it's now clicking. And it's been clicking for years. And it was actually to the point where I had a tension headache for a month. And I didn't know what to do. I was taking medication. I was taking pain relievers. I was eating. I was drinking. But somehow the tension headaches weren't going away. So I had to really dig deep, do that introspection. And because I'm in the mental health field, I have access to resources like this. I have a little bit more knowledge on how to help myself. And so I took on this activity, and it allowed me to see my doctor, go to get a referral for physical therapy, go to the dentist, and now I'm getting therapy for that. I'm getting massages to care for my jaw, but also now that I'm more aware of what's causing this, I know now how to support myself. So I actually verbally always remind myself when I'm writing emails is to just open my mouth a little bit, just a little bit, and just say to yourself, it's not that serious. You're going to be okay. You're just writing an email. And that's why I really wanted to share this activity with you guys. Even though we couldn't do it together, I am going to be sending just a blank body map that Amber can send off to you guys and do as an activity by yourself. Of course, this does require a lot of intentions. And so if this is something that you want because you want to help yourself, then it really just has to take that intention, and you'll probably learn a lot with how your body responds to stress. And in that way, you'll have a visual, kind of like a guide, like an OH&S standard, right? You have a guide, a physical, visual guide to see, okay, this is what happens when I'm stressed. This is what happens when I'm nervous or when I'm anxious. What can I do to help myself? And yes, you see, Robert says he sees tons of people unconsciously jaw clenching, and that's the reality when sometimes we get so caught up in how busy and sometimes difficult life is that we sometimes don't notice the little things that our bodies are telling us. And those are one of those things for me. And it was for a lot of years. I thought it was just normal. And so that's where the self-care versus self-soothing comes in. On the right side, you will see the self-soothing side. And these refer to things that give you comfort in the moment. So these are things that are short-term. So things to get you through a task or get you through a long and busy day. These are things that will give you some relief to a stressful situation. On the list there, you'll see some pretty healthy practices, such as deep breathing, having a warm cup of tea or coffee, movement or exercise. You'll notice when you're stressed, you might find yourself like huffing and puffing, like the wolf in Little Red Riding Hood. And you might not notice in the moment, but that actually allows you to release some tension. You might actually do it unconsciously as well, right? I guess in my perspective, I work in an office. I had a really heavy session with a client, and I will find myself exiting my office as soon as the client has left. And I will just unconsciously sigh really loudly. And I wouldn't notice in the moment that gave me relief. But now that I do this for my work, right, I go into these presentations and I'm more intentional about self-care. That's when I started noticing that these little things that we do are actually helping us get through the day. So in your screens right now, if you can, just sigh, moan and groan the loudest that you can if you're alone or you're at home. And you'll notice instantly that it's really just giving you that instant relief. It's short term. It's not meant to last forever. It's just so that you can get through what you need to do, right? I'm really anxious about this presentation that we have today. This is the biggest presentation I've had. And I did a lot of deep breathing and sighing before coming in, and that really helps me. The thing with self-soothing is it's really just finding what works for you, finding what will help you get through a difficult time. You might also notice that some on that list are not so healthy habits, such as drinking, smoking, drugs, but we know that those can still provide some relief and comfort. And using these from time to time can allow you to get through a hard day, finish a task, or simply just breathe. So I don't want you to think that self-soothing is a bad thing, because it really gives you access to very reachable tools, very low effort, free tools to calm yourself down. Because after a long day, it's not like we can see our doctors right away, or an argument with our partners. It's not like we can book a vacation right away, right? So these are helpful things to use for when we're dealing with something in the moment. And the one problem with self-soothing that I want you guys to keep note of is if you're stuck in that state of always soothing, if you're always just drinking, or you're always just going out for a smoke because you're stressed, because we know that that's how addiction can start, right? And we know with alcohol addictions, they're usually short-term fixes. They help numb the pain or the issue for a little bit, but then it'll all come back because we never actually address the root cause of what was causing you that stress. So we know that this is just a coping mechanism to numb or suppress issues. It never really addresses the root, and you never really get to find out how to really support yourself. I have a video, but it looks like our audio is not working, so we can just skip that. And we're going to move over to the self-care side. So as you can see, this is the long-term and well-being habits. And these require a lot of effort because they're always not easy. Like, for example, I knew that I had this presentation early this morning, but last night it was really hard to put my phone down. And I really had to do a mental battle in my head. If I put my phone down, I'll have good sleep and a fresh mind to come and talk to you guys today. But if I put my phone down, all the funny videos I'm watching on TikTok, I'm going to miss out on. But ultimately, I chose to put it down, even though it was really hard, even though it was so fun in the moment. And It was giving me some kind of relief in the moment. I chose to put it down because I know in the long run, which is today, this morning, it would really help me to have a good night's sleep so that I can come into this presentation with a clear mind and be able to give some mental health education in the best state that I can. So these are things like maintaining medical appointments, which sometimes is hard, right? We go to work. It's hard to book in and see our doctors, but these are the hard things that would really bring us away from always self-soothing so that we actually have the right tools when high stress situations come into play. A big thing too is staying connected. Making sure that you're saving some space to see your buddies or your girlfriends, grandparents, your parents, having a day with the kids. Really maintaining relationship with friends and family is one of the strongest protective factors for our mental health, because we're able to share these moments with others, and we know that we're not having to do it alone. You'll see things here too, like having a routine, so exercising, having a good diet, even just 10 minutes of movement in a day can be really, really worth it in the long run. One of the hardest things in this list is saying no when needed. So having those boundaries. And I struggle with this a lot as well. But I do recognize that these do not always come easy, especially in the context of workplace where it might be high stress or an unhealthy environment or a boss who does not provide or address the importance of mental health. And so that brings me to the second level, which is leadership. Those self-care practices are actually really crucial for leaders, managers, and supervisors. Sorry, we'll actually just have to skip a few more. Perfect, thank you. So the self-care practices that we just previously talked about is actually very, very important for the workplace leaders, because the leaders are the ones who have the most influence in the workplace. And the thing with employees is sometimes it's hard to follow what is being said when what is being modeled is not matching. And so when leadership is able to practice healthy self-care practices, the employees and the teams will actually mirror what those leaders are modeling because they're given the permission to do the same. So if leaders are modeling vulnerability, sustainable work practices, not skipping lunches, or ending work emails at 4:30 or whatever the workday ends, openly talks and shares about mental health conversations. This gives the team the permission to do the same because that's what's normal. But if, for example, overworking is rewarded, or skipping your lunches, or really burning yourself out for recognition, if that's what's rewarded, then that's what's going to be modeled in the workplace. And we know that high stress, high burnout, that would lead to high turnover, less productivity, less motivation, and more dissatisfaction with the industry. And so leadership is the gatekeepers of how mental wellness and well-being is modeled in the workplace, because you are paving the way for your team. It's like if people here are parents, for example, we can use that analogy. Have you ever seen those videos on the internet where these little kids, they wouldn't know what swear words are, but they're caught in videos saying the F word or the S word. Where do you think they would get that from, right? It could be modeled at home, and they're just picking it up. They're like sponges, and so they think, okay, this is okay, this is right, and so they start saying it even without knowing the context. But that's just kind of like what it is in the workplace. Leadership, you hold a lot of the power and the influence to change the culture and shift the organization connection. And so it's really important that self-care is a big part of how you are caring for yourself, because you're not only caring for yourself in that way, but you're influencing your team and those who look up to you to do the same. And lastly is the systemic level. Giving out resources simply is just not enough. My best friend is with a company who does have those mental health conversations in the workplace, reminders from their leaders that their benefits include counseling and that it's always there for them to access. It's in their safety talks. But do you think that my best friend has actually accessed counseling? He actually experiences a lot of his anxiety attacks mostly every night before work. But you might ask, like, why? Because they're doing the work. They're talking about mental health in the workplace. Why is he still feeling this way? They give you those resources. He should be fine. He's being supported. Well, walking the talk is actually the most important part of mental health awareness. Giving out resources or simply just talking about it sometimes is not enough, because what would really drive the awareness part is acting it out, right? Practicing what you're preaching. So when you're modeling these vulnerability, confidentiality with mental health conversations, or constant check-ins with your team, you open up the opportunity for people to feel more psychologically safe. You shift the culture, you create a safer and more respectful environment. The leadership is strengthened, and all in all, overall, the team is feeling psychologically safe. Because combating stigma starts by action in the workplace. So you're reducing all that risk of psychological injury. And a big part of it too is training the staff. So mental health first aid. We actually provide mental health first aid for a lot of employers and teams. And this allows for your team to know what signs to look for. How can they offer support? What kind of support can they offer to a coworker, or what are the signs to see if somebody might need some support? Opening up this opportunity for more hands-on training, more conversation, really allows for that action to come to life. And the thing with mental health in the workplace is it's not going to come overnight. However, it does require intentional work, continuous evaluation, and continuous just seeing what's working and what's not. And of course, our end goal for all of workplaces is to make sure that these mental health conversations are normal, because every single one of us experiences mental health challenges, because life is not always going to be not stressful. The thing with stress is we can't always eliminate it, because we all experience stress differently. We all respond to it differently. But what we really do have control of is how we can respond to it and how we can support ourselves through that. So I really hope that I was able to share some really good insights to you guys. Even if I can get through one person and help one person through this talk, that would mean a big, significant thing for me. But thank you so much for everybody's time. If anybody has any questions, feel free to shoot them in the chat, and I will try my best to answer them.
Thank you very much, Rojette, for your presentation. Wonderfully done. I really did enjoy the mental health first aid point that you did bring up at the end. What a great asset to have within your organization. Of course, including something like that possibly into your HSMS with an impairment response plan for short-term stressors, long-term stressors. So thank you so much for joining us on such a very important topic here in the construction industry in Saskatchewan.